Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Jank Diver Gaming YouTube channel. We are covering Brawlbarians League 2 with my podcast partner here, Teld. Teld, you took down League 2, which I think we have deemed the misery queue, the misery league, which we'll get.
That's what I eventually settled on was was misery league, and funny enough, you win that by just being the one who is willing to continue playing their games.
we'll talk about why it was so miserable here. You'll see that Teld has his deck list, or I have Teld's deck list rather, pulled up in front of us. For those of you who are just joining us or don't know what Brawlbarians is, this is an initiative that we started in our Discord. You can find links to our Discord down below if you want to get in on what we're talking about today. But Brawlbarians is basically stipulation-based deck building for the Brawl format. A lot of us, we found out, like the Brawl format, but the queues for Brawl and Arena are a little bit iffy. It's really hard to play like fun, interesting decks without just running into the highly competitive things over and over again. So we set this up. We've been refining the rules. We've basically set it up so that every 10-ish days, the players get a new set of stipulations to work with, and they have to build a deck within those stipulations. I interviewed Tyler last time, who won the red-white typal creature-based stipulations that we had to kind of kick off Brawlbarians, and it's been a little while since we actually finished League 2, but due to some outside circumstances, I had to put that on the back burner. But I've actually got Teld on the line to kind of ex post facto talk about what went on with the second league. So, Teld, I'm going to go ahead and throw this over to you. I would like you to talk about the stipulations that we ended up with and why we landed on this just being the misery queue. Probably, I have to imagine this is like the worst league that we can put together, right? Like it doesn't get worse than this.
I like to think that it can't get worse. I think we actually lost a number of people permanently from this one. It was so bad.
Not selling it very hard, but yeah, in Tyler's credit, Tyler likes the restrictive stuff, and he was the winner of the last round, so he got to pick the stipulations for the next round. And I don't believe he realized the combination of stipulations he picked would work out the way that they did. So he didn't really go into this thinking, oh, I'm going to have everybody have the worst time in the world, but it's just that's how the stipulations kind of broke out once we started playing games and building decks.
Sure. So the two stipulations he chose were actually two that individually I thought were going to be really, really fun and interesting stipulations. It just happens to be that the two combined together was miserable. So the two stipulations were one we called Pacifism, where you're not allowed to attack. And the other one was a rule I put in that you're only allowed to have one creature. So the 99 cards in your deck have to be non-creatures, and your commander has to be a creature. Together, like individually, these are cool because the no attack one, you can get around that with stuff like blood artists or, value engines or whatever. There's different ways of dealing of milling, maybe even of doing non combat related things. There's a lot of ways to play that. And the non-creature one, you could do things like make creature tokens, and you could still play a regular game of Magic. It would just be with a different subset of cards. And together, though, it really limited the amount of playable things you could do, because the number of like 99 cards you could put together that were even coherent was relatively small, it felt like. So the Johann deck I'm playing was actually the first deck that I put together, and it was off the idea that if we're all going to be playing no creatures, we're not allowed to attack, the games are going to go long. And so what I wanted was card advantage out of the command zone. I got told pretty quickly that by people who I was in the Discord brewing with, that they thought that the only playable deck was going to be Quasar, which is the SNC Esper shard card that whenever you draw a card, you drain your opponent for one, I believe. Maybe they just lose a life. It's one of the two. And I kind of was selling myself for a bit that was going to be kind of the best commander, and maybe I was missing something because people were concerned about being able to interact with artifacts and enchantments for the drain effects. But what ended up happening is I had this urge to test. So I tested a game against the Quasar player, and I stomped them so hard that it was kind of ridiculous. And so I just decided to submit it, and I said, you know what, whatever, we'll just play this. This is the deck I want to play. So we'll just fire this off, and we'll see how it goes. And it turns out having card advantage out of your command zone was basically a requirement, which narrowed down the number of playable commanders even further. Because the finals was me and another one of our regulars, Doug, and he was playing Tatiova Benthic Druid, which is the whatever, it's 5 mana for a 3/3, and when you play a land, you draw a card and gain a life. And so both of our games or our matches kind of went the same way. We just crushed all of our opponents because our commander drew us like 6 extra cards or more over the course of the game.
Yeah, I think the landing on card advantage from the command zone was the big thing this week, or this league rather, and a couple people realized that. I myself did not really fall in line with that. I played like Denethor. I played a really bad deck for this, like just straight up Black White Sacrifice where you can't play creatures. Just not a good idea. Also turned out a lot of people just had incidental life gain because a lot of people were trying to win with enchantments, like, you know, ill-gotten inheritance and stuff like that. So card advantage from the command zone, I think, was the winner. The Quasar thing, it's every week we've done this, every league we've done so far up to league number 4. It seems like we pick the stipulations and then like everybody kind of becomes an echo chamber of what they think the best possible commander will be for that, and then it turns out that it's not that commander at all. I think we did have 2 people who landed on Quasar, and I can't say what their final record was, but they did get buried by other card advantage decks because their commanders generated card advantage. So I think that was a very important thing to kind of break up the parity. I'll let you finish speaking about that, and then I do want to talk about like kind of the key cards. There were a couple cards that like were echoing around as like possible bannings for this one because of the structure of it. But yeah, there were some interesting things, and I wanted to note too that the pacifism requirement, the fact that you couldn't attack, we had to like specify exactly how that was worded, and what we landed on was you could not attack unless instructed to do so. So there were potential strategies where you somehow created a creature token, or you had your commander and you enchant it or something with an effect that forces it to attack. And I think Necroid actually tested against me with like a Zada Hedron Grinder deck that generated a bunch of goblin tokens via non-creature spells and then played like some sort of you must attack with all your creatures type thing. So skirting the rules a little bit, but I like that kind of what do they call it? Like Taskmaster-esque, like, oh, here's what it literally says. Is what you're doing falling in line with what it literally says? And the answer to that was, yeah, like that was fair game. So I'm not sure it was the optimal strategy, but it felt like the optimal strategy was just make sure you have tons and tons of cards in your hand at any given moment and just play for the, like, not even the late game. You know how we do early, mid, late game? Whatever comes after late game, that's what you were playing for this league.
Yeah, to put it into perspective, we played 100 card formats, and mine and Doug's game came down to literally the last 2 cards in my library.
Yeah. Standout cards in your deck. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. It's like, it's blue-red spells. Like, you've got blue-red spells. Everything is card draw or disruption of some sort with, like, a tiny bit of artifact ramp. But anything that really stood out to you, like, game in, game out?
Yeah, there were a few things, and I do want to say that I think my deck might have been better if I'd put a Craving of Inigo. That's the alchemy enchantment you can play from your graveyard that lets you make a creature attack. Mm-hmm. Because I could have used it with my actual win condition as like another pseudo fling effect. So my deck's actual win condition, and I think one of the advantages I had is that I was most of the time trying to win in a single turn. So my goal was to play a bunch of spells, mill a bunch of cards, play a very, very long game, and then once my cards in graveyard got high enough that it was equal to my opponent's life total, I could, or it was enough, I could either Gandalf Sanction, kill their commander, dome them for 30 damage, or I could play one of the various Serpentine Curve, kind of make a giant thing based on your graveyard, plus a fling effect or like a Gravitic Punch. So those were that was like how my deck won most of the games, conceivably. And then Fiery Inscription, the enchantment from Lord of the Rings, when you cast a spell, deal 2 damage, that did win me a game as well. So the standout cards, it's kind of hard to say because my deck, like, it's funny because you see your whole deck, but all of them kind of do the same thing. Like, yeah, there's a certain element of my deck. Part of why it was so strong was it was basically Xeroxing. Like, all of my decks, all the cards in my deck basically either draw cards, they're part of my 2-card combo win condition, or they remove a commander from the battlefield. So, I mean, standout ones, probably Contested Game Ball was fantastic. Yeah. Pretty much every time you drew it, it was just like a personal howling mine for like 4 or 5 turns, and then you eventually got paid out with the treasure.
That's a really funny one I wanted to mention because like I didn't even think about this card till people started brewing and talk about it, because like this is a non-card in my mind because of like how terrible it was in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, right? Like it lowered your win percentage type card, and it was like
absolutely horrible.
It dawned on people like, oh, you can't be attacked. Like you can't be attacked, so like your opponent can't take the game ball from you, which means it is going to draw you 5 cards and make a treasure over the course of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was really powerful. I don't really have to go into why Treasure Cruise is good in this format. I will say Founding the Third Path's a card I've not really liked before. It's a 2-mana enchantment out of DMU with Read Ahead. And when you cast it, you can cast a 1 or 2 mana instant or sorcery from your hand for free. And then you mill 4 cards, and then you can exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard and cast it. My deck was seeing so many cards and wanted to get a bunch of cards in the graveyard that this card ended up kind of just being like a Snapcaster Mage. Like the thing that like when this card got spoiled and people kind of hoped it would be a Snapcaster Mage adjacent kind of card, it just wasn't this deck. There was a really powerful alchemy card, Mapping the Maze. Choose an instant or sorcery in your graveyard for 2 mana. It perpetually incorporates blue and gains when you cast the spell, draw a card, and then you return a multicolor instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. So it could make your red spells multicolor and like draw a card. But what I was doing was doing that and then returning like an expressive iteration or a Gandalf Sanction or something like that from my graveyard to my hand.
We should probably also mention this was pre Outlaws of Thunder Junction. League 2 was right before that Outlaws came out, so there's no like quick shot here or anything like that, or slick sequence rather, whatever it's called. When I was like, I brewed a lot of different decks and somehow landed on like the worst of all the decks I brewed. And part of it was experimental. I just wanted to see how it would perform. It performed terribly, but I landed on 3 what I considered mirror breaker cards for this stipulation. That's kind of I'm considering my area of expertise is to find the like niche cards that are perfect for given stipulations, whether I play them or not. You have one of them, which is Narset Parter of Veils. And, it's really weird on me that it dawned on me that like shutting down opponents' card advantage would be huge in this stipulation, but that I like not playing card advantage from my command zone was not something that dawned on me. So like there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance or whatever it's called there. But Narset was huge, right? Because that could just be a huge mirror breaker against other card advantage decks. Another one like on the softer side was Teo the Shield Mage, which is a white planeswalker that gives you hexproof. And you'll notice a lot of these decks would try to win by shoot like Gravitic Punch, for example. Just the fling effects, they don't work while Teo's on board, so it kind of makes you work extra hard. Plus people were talking up Quasar, and I think Quasar targets a player, so it shuts that ability off as well. And then the big one, which got a lot of flack once people got onto it, was Thought Distortion, which is basically Thought Distortion is 4 black. I have it on screen now. It's a sorcery that can't be countered, which is huge, and it exiles all non-creature, non-land cards from target player's hand and graveyard. So like it's the ultimate mirror breaker card against people who don't have creatures in their deck. So basically like mega duress your hand and nerf your graveyard at the same time, which can be a huge deal breaker. This was probably like the best card in my deck. I just didn't draw it enough for it to matter against the opponents where it would have mattered, but there was a lot of complaining that this card was something we didn't proactively ban, because it feels like, this is like a card you just don't see very often. It's usually not very good, but given the set of stipulations, like just absolute backbreaking. And maybe we should have banned it. Maybe we should have, but
maybe. I will say I did have a game against Harold in which he Thought Distortion to me 7 cards out of my hand. and then Thought Distortion to me later into the game for an additional 5, and I still won. So I mean, this is the power of card advantage out of your command zone, because like I sat with Johann in play and he didn't answer Johann, so when he Thought Distortion to me, I just like I had a spell on top of my library, it drew me a card, and then like I drew another card, and then I drew a Treasure Cruise. And the draws obviously have to come up in such a way that it works for you, but the Thought Distortion was pretty brutal. I did think I was going to lose that game. I put the videos of my few games I had recorded on my personal channel, which is the YouTube channel Teld Talks. But that being said, like I was pretty sure I was going to be dead there. I will say there was one hard counter to it. Lazatep Plating is a card from War of the Sparks, and so it was 1 in a blue for an instant that amasses zombies 1, and then you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. So you could actually counter it with this. So against the black deck, if I had the option, one of the things I did, and I did this against Mop, and I don't know if I don't think he actually ended up having it, but I sat there and played with 2 mana open for Lazatep Plating for like, I don't know, 10 turns. Mm-hmm. I just made sure that I wasn't going to get Thought Distortion out of the game. Thought Distortion also had a secondary effect on my deck where a lot of the, I didn't actually consider this when I was deck building, that first of all, Bajuka Bogs in the format and Thought Distortion and all of this, and like cards like Gandalf Sanction and Invade the City, they require cards to be in your graveyard. So does Experimental Overload. Yeah. The way I got around that was either to get Fiery Inscription in play, which is how I beat Herald. The other way I could have done it was Serpentine Curve doesn't care where the cards are. They can be in your graveyard or exile. So as long as I still had access to that card, I could still conceivably win, even if I got Thought Distortion off all the rest of my win conditions.
Yeah, and I think Seize the Storm is the same as well, where it counts cards that are exiled as well. So
I believe it's only cards of flashback.
Oh, is it? Maybe you might be right.
Yeah, looking at it now, it is. It's this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard plus the number of cards with flashback
okay, so it's
own in exile.
Gotcha. It's a little different than Serpentine Curve there, but yeah. Mop I think approached the deck building from the same way I did, and like we got four or five turns into the game, he's like, nah, I'm good, and he just conceded. And he's like, I think I'll sit this one out. And it's funny because we almost got Chris to join. Chris was like, hey, let me check out this Brawlbarians thing you guys are doing, and then we told him the stipulations. He's like, you know what, I probably better not join this, just doesn't seem very fun to me. So there was a lot of naysaying about it. I think we've like corrected. I think everybody who participated kind of recognized that, we like restrictions, but when there are such harsh restrictions compiled on top of each other, it kind of stifles the fun aspect of it. And like I was talking with Tyler for the last recording that we did, there's also a hidden third restriction every single time that this is a peasant environment already, so you're restricted to the commons and uncommons. On Arena, there are no rares and stuff like that. Probably should have mentioned that at the top of the video, but by default, all of the Brawlbarians leagues are peasant restricted, so commons and uncommons. Though, if you win a Brawlbarians league, you are allowed to pick the stipulations for the next league, and one of the stipulations you can always pick is that rares are allowed. So if you're the type of person who's like, man, why don't we play with rares? Like, you got to show us that you can win with the commons and uncommons, and then you're allowed to pick whatever stipulations we work with next. So yeah, this one was very dicey. I actually waffled around with like 4 or 5 different decks, and I probably got about 80 cards in, including lands, and then just like didn't feel inspired to fill out the last like 15 to 20 cards, and then finally landed on something that ultimately played very poorly. But I think you nailed it. I think you did exactly what this league wanted to be doing. And yeah, I think we were both. It's funny because the pacifism requirement was one that I came up with, and the other requirement of no creatures in your deck was one that you came up with, and then Tyler picked them and combined them together. So like I said, maybe we're the problem, since we individually came up with the stipulations, they just got combined into this monstrosity. But moving forward, I think people are going to be a little more careful about how restrictive the combination of stipulations is. For the again, I probably should have explained at the beginning, but there's 2 stipulations. When someone joins the Brawlbarian League, they're allowed to offer 2 of their own stipulations, and at the start of each league, the winner of the last league combines any 2 stipulations that have been offered by players who have joined up. So there's a big pool of stipulations, and if you win, you're allowed to combine them in whatever order you want or whatever combination you want. So this one just happened to get a little bit out of hand, which was not immediately apparent until people started deck building and playing games.
Yeah, Doug and I both agreed that we think this one would have been more enjoyable if more people had landed on card advantage from the command zone was good. That being said, it's kind of hard to say like what cards are you even, I'm trying to think through the creatures you could even play, and it's like maybe Svella Ice Shaper is one of the ones that could have done something in this format, but it's really hard to not play blue in this format too, because the counter spells are so effective, because all of your opponent's cards are not going to be interactable with if you don't have counter spells. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think this one, the biggest issue was just the number of cards that you could actually play that can can progress your game plan, can win the game, that sort of thing was pretty difficult. It did lead some pretty cool games though. I thought my game against Harold was super fun, and my game against Doug was an absolute nail biter. Came down to, like I said, the last 2 cards in my library. Both of us made a minor mistake on our last turn, and luckily Doug's was just a little bit worse than mine, so I ended up getting squeaking out a close victory there. But it was an absolute nail biter. Tons that we just both were sitting there for the entire game with like 6 cards in our hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know it's a little weird to be like, hey, come join Brawlbarians. We had this super not fun time playing this one, but I think the later stipulations, like I said, this was League 2 that we're talking about, and we're actually closing out League 4 now. There's just been a big gap between when I've been able to get you, and hopefully I can get Necroid on to talk about League 3, which was, I think, a huge improvement over this one here. But, sure. I mean, like, the current league we're working with has been pretty nice, right, where we have equal mana values across our stuff, and we have a Planeswalker as our commander. I think people are having way more fun with that one. So, yeah, I mean, again, just to pitch Brawlbarians, we think it's really fun. Like, if you like Brawl, or you just like deck building in general, especially if you like, working within constraints, or you like the peasant card pool that's available on Arena, this has been, I think, a really fun deck building exercise for a lot of people, where you can have some freedom, like a little bit of freedom, not all the freedom in the world, but you can have a little bit of freedom with the type of decks that you build, but not have to like sit there and play against, the optimized Arena Keenan deck or Atraxa deck over and over and over again in the Brawl queues. So, it's been a great time. I appreciate everybody who's come out and supported it and given us feedback. We're still tweaking like pods, and we're tweaking like different rules and stuff like that. So feedback is very welcome. But if you are interested in joining the Brawlbarians League, find our Discord link down below. Come join up, say, hey, where's the Brawlbarian stuff? And we will direct you towards it and let you know all the rules from there. But yeah, Teld, anything you wanted to say to wrap up on Johann here in League number 2?
I mean, just come play. It's really fun. I mean, I think I spend most of my effort in this league just in the deck building portion. Usually I'll end up playing like 3 games, and then somebody will be a deterministic winner, and I'll be like, all right, cool, let's get to the next stipulation so I can get back to deck building. I really enjoy the challenge of that. I typically don't enjoy constructed because it's, once you know the meta game, like unless you're really, really entrenched in a meta, it's hard to break in with new builds. But all these stipulations create metagames that we've never played, and so there is a lot of fun in just playing around with the cards and seeing like what you come up with. So I've really enjoyed that part of it for sure. And some of the leagues have been really, really good. Like last week I played a Roko deck in our Tiny Leaders and didn't end up winning with it, but it was a really fun time. Like got to do some cool stuff. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend coming to play it. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, and I don't think it's gotten quite, like, stale. Like, there was a little bit of a fear that, like, people would just run back the same commanders every week and just, like, tweak those commanders to the new rules. But it feels like people are just really working from the ground up. Like, I don't know. Drix somehow managed to put together a zombie infestation deck for the most current stipulation, and like he's just been waiting for the right time to unleash it. But people are really building up instead of like just trying to optimize. We've got a couple spikes. Like I think we've got both ends of the spectrum. We've got spikes who are going to build the best deck they can every time, and then we've got people who aren't necessarily approaching it from that perspective, but everybody kind of is like on the same page that this is just for fun. So it's a good time. I do kind of wish we had went and ran with the you can't play cards that are in our peasant cube, because I do think cutting out that top like tier of cards did make deck building more interesting for that first week. That being said, I think it probably would be harder to keep track of, right? Because the rules, the easiest rules to follow are the ones that you can go in on the filter for Arena and just be like, okay, these are the cards I'm looking for, or these are the cards that I can't have, filter things in or out. So that was one of those awkward things where I think you had to go in and deck check everybody, and like almost everybody had 1 or 2 cards at some point.
Like four people had Bone Splitter, and I was like, Bone Splitter's in the peasant. Like you can't play Bone Splitter this week, and it just like everybody was like, oh man, I didn't know. Yeah. I did want to ask real quick, just to close things out. When you win a league, like I mentioned, you get to pick the stipulations for the next league, but you also get to replace those stipulations with new ones of your own for whatever, subsequent leagues come beyond that. So did you end up landing on new stipulations? I saw one was like inverse peasant. I don't know. Did you put that there actually? Was that you?
That was not me. No.
Okay.
Okay, I was working on this one for a minute and I never came up with anything I actually wanted to run that stuck out. And I talked to you about this one and you thought it sounded fun. So I'm gonna go ahead and add it to the list. We're doing wait, that's illegal. As my next stipulation on mine, and you can't commit crimes. So we will be playing all creatures and combat tricks. We're not targeting our opponent or their stuff.
That's gonna be people. There's gonna be some workarounds to that for sure. That's gonna be an interesting one from deck building perspective. Like I bet you people get in there and you have to deck check them and you're like, nope, that commits a crime. It's funny too that that cuts out counter spells. So we'll see how that shifts the metagame, but. Yeah, that should be a fun one. Our current one's really fun, and I think people seem to enjoy League 3, which I didn't participate in myself, but yeah, it's a good time, and we're hoping to continue building it up from here. So like Teld said, come join us in the Discord, come play. Teld, thanks for taking the time to talk about your deck here. It was a really sweet one. I think you landed on a unique deck based on where everybody else landed up for that week as well, and we got a game to play ourselves for this league, so we'll see. Maybe it'll be me recording myself one of these days, but I keep approaching these from the worst possible angle, so we'll see. But thanks, Bud, for taking the time to talk about this one.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And to the rest of y'all, thanks as always for watching. My name's Timothy with Jank Diver Gaming, and we will see you next time.